All right, that cowbell can only mean one thing, and it's not more cowbell. It is time for the John Riggins Show with Dexter Manley. I am Todd Castleberry. It's Friday. Let's get this party started, Riggo.
Yes, let's do that, Todd. It's a wonderful day. Well, it ain't exactly a wonderful day here. It's been a couple great days this week. We've got to be careful with that song, though, Todd. My neck has got a little kink in it lately. I don't know what the hell's going on with that. So I play, you play that song, you play Low Rider, and, you got to be doing this stuff.
Yeah.
It hurts.
Is that the moonwalk?
No, I never did master the moonwalk. Did you?
No.
Huh?
I don't know how to do the moonwalk.
I tried it. Remember, it was one of my commercials. But they had me on a what do you call it? A track, and they just pulled the track, and
like
I just
a treadmill.
Yeah. Well, no, it was like a dolly. They had me on a dolly, and they just pulled me across on a rope, and I was doing this stuff, and it looked just like, oh wow, he's smooth.
Yeah, that's why.
If I could have I could duck walk. I couldn't moonwalk. Yeah, you're right, Todd. I believe the first day of fall occurred this week. And, of course, that means the end of summer. And, of course, when I think of summer, I go back to my childhood and the depression. We talked about that last week that I used to experience having to go back to school. But one of the great highlights of summer was in the middle of August, I believe, that Centralia back in the 50s used to have a carnival that would come to town. Mm-hmm. And they had different rides there. They had a Ferris wheel. They had something called a bullet, which was like an arm that had an axle in the middle of it, and it went around and around, and it literally had these little compartments in it, and they spun this way, and you go around, and I never ever rode on that thing, and I never really ever wanted to because it just looked like, ooh, that could be a little rough. But they also had this, and you guys have seen these, tilt-a-whirl. Do you know what the tilt-a-whirl is?
Not a fan of that either.
Goes up and goes, the tub. We call them the tubs because you get in this thing and it goes around and around, and then you go, and the thing that you're on goes around and around.
That's what's called the Himalaya.
Is that what it is now? It changed the name because I'm telling you, 60 years ago, it was called the tubs or the tilt-a-whirl. But anyway, so I'm wanting to ride on the tilt-a-whirl. I'm with my dad, and he doesn't want to ride on it. So he sees this kid there that's about 3 years older than me. He goes to school in Centralia. And his name was Alan, and he says, "Hey, Alan," he says, "I think he's a little bit too young to go on this by himself. Would you mind going on a ride with him?" And he goes, "Yeah, okay, Mr. Riggins." So my dad pays the admission, which I think was 25 cents back in those days for each ticket. We get on, and it makes one pass, and all of a sudden, I'm like going, "Oh, this is really cool." And I look over at Alan, and he's kind of like, and then it goes around again. All of a sudden, he's like, and so we pass by the operator, and as we go by him, Alan goes, "Stop." And the guy doesn't hear him. Yeah. We go around again, and now all of a sudden it's, "Stop." And now he's, and we go by the third time, he goes, "Stop." And and then one more time around, he goes, "Stop." And finally the guy hears him and pulls on the brake. Alan, he exits the tilt-a-whirl, upchucks, of course. And, I'm to this day still a little, because he shortened our ride. This guy didn't start it back. Said, "Hey, folks, we got a guy here. He wants to get off. We're going to let him off. We'll start. Brain. Everybody stay in your seats. The ride isn't done yet." No, it's everybody out of here. Yeah. I'm thinking to myself, my dad paid 25 cents for this clown to ride with me. And, and he stops the ride halfway through and gets on an upchuck. I'm going, okay. So fast forward about 7 or 8 years, we're out putting up hay. And I think we were putting up hay for Bob Jenkins, if I'm not mistaken. And he had a crew out there. Had a crew of about 6 guys. Big hayfield, 80 acres. I believe it was alfalfa, which is a lot of alfalfa. Jesus, I don't even want to think. A couple, 3 days of work out there, morning to in the evening. Well, there's a little place called Four Corners. I don't know if I ever told you about that. Also, it originally was called Beckerville, because it was basically where roads crossed out there. And you could get gas, and then you went inside there, and they had, you could get a hamburger or whatever, and cold beer. And then Juneauville erupted, and it kind of became a night spot for the country folks out there. You get a beer, and of course Esther Juneau, who, she was a proprietor there, and she was a cook, and like I said, you get hamburgers or whatever, French fries, all that stuff. Plus, Esther was a hell of a cook, and she made the best pie around. Do you like pie, Dexter?
Yeah, I like
So.
pie.
Okay,
I
well.
like pie.
So anyway, we're putting up hay. We come in there, and Bob Jenkins was paying the bill. So it was like, the crew, he goes in, buys your lunch. So we're in there. We eat lunch. Everything's good. And Esther comes around and says, "Any you boys like pie?" And, of course, my hand shot up, yeah. And, of course, Alan was a part of this hay crew. And, his hand, he went up and said, "Yeah." He said, "I'll have pie," and I think my brother was working. So everybody ordered pie. Well, it was pineapple cream pie was what Esther made. But she didn't put quite enough cornstarch in it that day. So, cornstarch tightens stuff up. It makes it thick, like pudding. And so Esther brought the pie out, had the meringue on top, but the pie was kind of runny, just kind of went out the side. But still, tasted great. So I'm sitting over there garballing my pie, just going crazy. And Alan, he's over there eating his. Well, back in my house, you had to eat. Whoever ate the quickest got the second round, right? So I was a fast eater. So I got to looking at Alan. He's having his pie and enjoying it, and everything's wonderful. And I said, "Hey, Alan," I said, "You know what that pie looks like to me?" And Alan goes, "No, what?" Because I'm thinking way back, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I'm thinking, he's got a weak stomach.
Riggo wants the pie.
So I said, that looks just like, and you have to be a farmer here, and I'm going to explain what it is. So that looks like calf scours. And when a calf gets scours, it'll kill it, a young calf like that. But when it'll shoot a stream out the back of it that looks like French's mustard coming out.
Oh,
I mean, it is just like squirts out.
Oh.
And I said, "Alan, that looks just like scours." And all of a sudden it was like,
I'm with Alan.
he was, when I was like, baby Huey, I went, as soon as I knew too, I had him because he was, and once again, he started getting kind of thick in the throat there, swallowing hard. And I went, "You're not going to eat that pie?" And he went, "No." And I went, "Well, shit, we shouldn't waste it." And, of course, I garbled Alan's pie.
Don't mess with Riggo when he wants to eat.
Yeah, I did it. It worked out beautifully.
John, I got a question. How old were you when your dad took you to the carnival?
I was probably like 10 years old or whatever. But, I mean, he didn't think I was old enough to ride on the tubs. But
Why didn't he ride with you?
God only knows. He might have ended up like Alan.
He knew Alan.
Maybe he knew something about Alan I didn't know. He wanted to go watch, there's a lot of different perversions out there. He wanted to go watch Alan throw up. I got no clue. Anyway, thought we'd get it going with a little summertime, springtime. Okay.
Yeah, summertime's over. Fall is here, Dex.
It
It's
is.
in the air, man. And that chill in the morning. It's crisp. What, you like the fall?
I like all weather.
Okay.
But you
I
like
the
to
fall,
change
but
the season.
I like to change the season, except I used to didn't like summer, but up here in Houston, it's okay.
Lot
But
different.
it's steamy, a lot different. Yeah.
I'm not going to argue with you because I've been down that area and they get ungodly humidity in Houston.
Yes.
But I'll tell you what, guys, it was 90-some% humidity this morning. Now, granted, there was fog because I'm over there by the river. There's all kinds of fog, which obviously you're going to have high humidity. But it gets pretty damn humid around here. Don't kid
Oh,
yourself.
no question.
It does.
I suppose maybe not quite as consistent as that whole Gulf region. I guess you go it starts down in like what is that? The island down there, Padre Island.
Padre.
And goes all the way up. Houston keeps going right around New Orleans, Tampa, and all the way down. So
The Gulf.
anyway, we got a little action going this Sunday, right? And this game is in
Cleveland.
Cleveland.
In Cleveland, 1 o'clock.
This will be an interesting game.
No question.
I think once again, you get the first game, you beat the Philadelphia Eagles, you come from behind, everybody's getting, oh wow, something's going on here. This team's got moxie. They came from behind. You go out to Arizona, and basically the roof falls in on you. The
You lay an
defense.
egg. You lay
What's
an
that?
egg. You lay an egg. They laid an egg.
I would say so for the most part.
Yeah.
The defense at the end, I think, kind of came unraveled a little bit. The offense never got going for the most part. So now you're playing a team that, I don't know what Mayfield. This is his third year in the league. I think it
This
is.
is Baker Mayfield's third year.
Yeah. So, you're going up to Cleveland, and this is a team that was supposed to really make something happen last year, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And they disappointed a lot of people. Probably the least people that were disappointed were the actual Cleveland fans. Because when you're a dog, until you turn into a princess, it's like nobody really has any expectations for you. But as I look at this game now, for Cleveland, I got to believe they're thinking this is a must-win game if our season, and we're not going to have another disappointing season. That's my take on it, and I think that's the way this goes. So you got to figure you're going to get Cleveland's best shot. And for Washington, once again, and based on last week where I'm still in a quandary with what's really going on in the Ron Rivera era as to how the game finished up, and we talked about that on Tuesday, how Ron decided not to get anybody injured, so he called the dogs off, which I'm going, man, this is unprecedented in the NFL as far as I know. I've never been around a coach who wasn't pedal to the metal.
Right.
Particularly, even I dare say, even in a losing situation, never ever heard a guy go, "Oh, I got to save the troops." It's no, we're going to try and win this no matter what. And that to me, that's where something's kind of weird, because that's got to be your mindset. It ain't over till it's over. What happened to Yogi Berra? Remember Yogi Berra? It ain't over till the fat lady sings or whatever.
I heard that expression before.
Yeah. So anyway, to me, I think this is a pivotal game. If you're going in the right direction, and I guess a lot of it is not necessarily the outcome of the game, you can't really depend on that, but it's basically how do you play. And I guess at this point, you have to look at the team and look at them and evaluate them on how they're performing, not necessarily how the score turns out, because there's a lot of things, flukes can change that, and that's what you're looking for is improvement. In other words, the defense has got to come back and play like they did in the first week, and for crying out loud, it's the third week.
Second half of first week.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. But then again, keep this in mind, and Dexter will be the first to tell you that the defense kind of gets to where when the offense is coming off after a 3 and out, they got that look on their face when you're coming off the field. Like, you don't want to look down at the defense. You don't want to make eye contact with them. They're kind of going, hey guys, how about a little help here? We got to go back at it. So I'm thinking that the offense has got to pick it up. And when I say pick it up, I mean pick it up. I mean, they got to put some points on the board. What do you think?
Well, I tell you what, both of these teams sort of similar to me. I think the Cleveland Browns probably be a little bit ahead of the Redskins. I mean, the Washington team, because Washington hadn't scored but 7 points in their last 2 games before the half, and now Cleveland have scored much more points than that. I would say that the Cleveland has an excellent offensive lineman, the whole front five. But they have a guy that's been out for a while with a sore ankle. And I think that's going to be a good matchup with the Redskins Washington front 7 versus Cleveland.
You would think so.
Yeah, linemen.
Well, if the front 7 of the Burgundy and Gold if that's the strength, and to date, their defense is ranked. Washington is 13th ranked.
I'm not going to disagree with you. A lot of that ranking is coming from the first week, is my guess. Against
Philadelphia. 2 games. That's all we got. That's all we got to evaluate.
Because there's something about it that kind of, I want to believe what you're saying, and ultimately it is.
Well,
this
is where stats lie.
Well, ultimately it has to be. Those guys. You got what 5 first-round draft picks,
right,
on your front line there. Mm-hmm. You throw Kerrigan into the mix. You got 5 but you got 1 in the backfield. So my point is they got to be your strength. Either that or you've missed the boat somehow.
Well, and that's what's getting all the press and all the hype, and everybody wants to believe. But really, they've played 2 very good quarters out of 8 so far. Gave up 17 in the first half. Looked terrible against Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. We saw what Arizona did to them.
Right. Well, this is where I wanted to complete my thought here, is that what I saw last week at the tail end of that game, when Washington needed to get the ball back, and you had to know that Arizona's going to run the football, and they couldn't stop him.
Right.
That, to me, I'm going with those guys, with the horses they got up front, that ain't a good sign.
Downs.
That ain't a good sign, I don't think. So, like anything else, you can overcome it. In other words, you can get that trend off the pages and start a new one. And like I said, I think on Sunday they got to start something like that. They really got – the defense has to show up. I don't think that they can get into a situation, and I don't think this had happened, but if the Browns somehow, for whatever reason, Beckham Jr. or whatever, if he goes nuts or, and they get something going offensively where they're putting a lot of points on the board, I don't think that Washington's ready for the offense to bail the defense out. I think the defense is, like you said, Todd, it's still got to be the strength of this team for a while here until this offense catches up, if it's going to catch up.
Yeah.
Well, again, strength versus strength. The Browns' offense is ranked 16th overall, but their rushing attack with Chubb and Kareem Hunt, number 2 in the league.
That tells you exactly what's going to happen.
So Washington's front seven against Cleveland's going to run the ball. 176, averaging over 176 yards per game through 2 games. Number 2 overall in the league. Their passing offense is ranked 27th, which clearly there's weaknesses in the secondary with the burgundy and gold. So again, strength versus strength, and we're gonna see who's good for it.
Their first game, if I'm not mistaken, was
blown out against the Ravens.
That's what I was going to say.
Non-competitive.
Yeah. Well, then that means they got all their rushing yards last week. Because I was thinking, were they able to run the ball? Well, obviously they couldn't run the ball against the Ravens.
Exactly.
I mean, if they would have controlled the clock, and they wouldn't have they got into the situation they got into. So.
And again, stats through 2 games, looking for trends. Yeah. But that also was the strength of their team last year as well.
Well, I'll say this here: if Cleveland runs the ball very effectively, but now that puts the pressure on Odell because now he wants the football.
Absolutely, he does.
He wants the football, and if they running the football and picking up first down and drives, then Odell Beckham's get upset, and then that's chaos.
It's possible. He hadn't erupted this. He's been. I mean, don't you think about the whole offseason and everything? There weren't any Odell sightings anywhere, were there? In other words,
lower key.
Huh?
Lower key for him.
In other words, yeah, exactly. He's usually some pretty high maintenance in the offseason.
He got a touchdown.
He's definitely high maintenance.
He got a touchdown last week.
So he scored 1 touchdown so far this year.
I believe that is correct.
Well, when you consider who, and I don't know. My guess is, though, that he has a pretty high opinion of his abilities. So 1 touchdown in 2 games, don't you think he's thinking like
listen, it's hard for me to be great with all these average dudes around.
Yeah,
that's why he's gonna get upset if they keep running the football effectively.
You know that's a good point, Dexter. You wonder, you got to figure he's good for it. That at some point there's going to be something on the sidelines. Although, it's not the same now without fans in the stadium.
Well, why do you think the Giants got rid of him? Just because
there's
of that?
No
Me. And listen, Baker Mayfield, we know how erratic he is and how bad he has been. He played pretty decent last week. Yeah. He threw a ton of interceptions last year, but the pressure for him to get the ball to Odell and get that passing game clicking. So, again, for them, you're attacking the B&G secondary because clearly – that's the weakest link on that side of the ball.
Well, I say this here. Baker Mayfield's under the pressure because 2 coaches have left, and now the ownership saying he has to prove himself.
I think Riggo defined the term last week, coach killer.
There you go, coach killer.
Yeah, he'd fall right into that. And as I was saying, I mean, if I don't know what a coach killer looks like, I don't know what I'm talking about.
And Kevin Stefanski.
But I kept mine to myself for the most part. I finally did at the end, as I told you last week. I let the bad me out. And of course, basically what I did is I took my football and went home.
Yeah. But John, the Redskins was they move the football around. They pass well in our day. Did you find yourself getting upset? If the passing game was going well, that means it's not going to run the football. But you always got to run the football.
Dex, I looked at it like I like to mitigate collisions. So if I'm not getting the football, that means my collisions are going to go down. Yeah. I didn't have a problem with it. At some point in time, the only problem my last year is when I would go in for a while and then I'd come out and I was like a 2 platoon. I was going, well, this ain't working for me. You go on the sideline. I have a tendency to lose interest, like they say a lot. It's like, well, okay, when do I come back in? Maybe never. So that was one thing. But no, if you're winning and we're throwing the football constantly, I'm fine with that. It don't make any difference to me. Maybe no, that ain't the way it was. Because I'd learned throughout my career, basically, going to New York and playing up there, and Joe Namath was, the star of the team. And really, literally was, the biggest thing in New York City at that time. I don't know, maybe when Frank Sinatra came to town, he had an equal. But other than that, or Muhammad Ali, but he was that guy. So I kind of got used to being a second or third or even a fourth banana. So it wasn't a big deal. What I learned was go out and do your job, because if you don't, then somebody else is going to be doing it, even though it ain't exactly what you signed up for. Mm-hmm. And when I came down here my first 2 years, I was a blocking back. Well, I didn't sign up for be a blocking back. But I became one, and I did it begrudgingly, but I did it, and I didn't complain. And then things evolved, and things finally came around. But I think, and that's what you call being a professional. I mean, and it all gets down to breaks. Who knows? You could have been moved to defensive tackle or something at some point in your career. Exactly.
Yeah, right.
And you would have went, well, okay, but boy, this isn't what I had in mind. And who knows how your career would have went. Yeah. So, and that's where so much of it is in the hands of coaches and how they see their talent. And Coach Gibbs is a great place to look and look at Joe when he first came here. In fact, I was telling the guy this morning, I said, I give Joe, when he came here, he was really a real green coach, and I think he had visions of sugar plums dancing in his head that were unrealistic.
Air Coryell?
Yes, based on the talent that he inherited when he came here. Mm-hmm. He didn't have those guys. He had a completely different set of, he had a different team. Mm-hmm. And, we went the first 5 games, 0-5. And then finally in Chicago, and I've got to believe that Joe Bugle had a lot to do with this, he was going, Joe, you want to keep your job? Knock off the Air Coryell. Let's run the ball a little bit and see what happens.
Yeah, that's why I asked that question.
And I think Joe Gibbs listened to him, and next thing you know, his philosophy changed, and I've said this 1,000 times, one of the basic tenets in biology is the organism that adapts survives. And he adapted, and obviously he prospered, and he went on and won 3 Super Bowls, went to 4. So that to me is, what you got to work with the people that you have, and that's something that Joe. And the irony of all ironies, isn't it, that if you think of Joe Gibbs, you think of Don Coryell, and you think of Joe Gibbs, you have completely 2 different coaches and philosophies, and yet Joe Gibbs came with Coryell's philosophy and abandoned it because it was abandoning him.
Yeah.
And Jack Cook was going to abandon him as well had things not changed.
I got a question. Did you hang out with Joe Namath when you got?
Yeah, I went to his place every once in a while, but not really. I mean, I went over there one time.
Was it Bachelor's 3?
Yeah. A kid, Chris Ferrisopoulos, who was a DB, he was a free safety punt returner. He and I were good friends. We worked out together as rookies out in Manhattan Beach, California before we went. I was the first-round pick. He was the third. And so we got to be friends. We were roommates while I was up there. And it seemed like on a Saturday, when did we get off? On Mondays after the game when we'd meet, have the meeting, and then I think we had Tuesdays off. One of those days, he and I would end up going up to Bachelor's 3, and eventually Pete Lammons, who was a tight end, he'd come in.
Bachelor's 3, are you familiar? So that was Broadway
taboo.
Bar.
Yeah. I guess the deal was he had to sell it, but it didn't mean he couldn't go there.
Might have
it was
been
kind of
some
weird.
Connections to the mob. Possibly
that's what Pete Rozelle thought.
Rumored.
That he said basically, hey, listen, you're going to, if you don't sell that, you're going to be out of the league because I'm going to suspend you. And I think for a while there, Namath bucked him and said, well, I ain't selling my restaurant. And Pete said, well, I'm serious. And at some point in time, Joe went, well, maybe I better sell the restaurant.
Yeah.
But we used to hang out there a little bit. But when to answer your question, not really.
Yeah, but did he?
He was doing the movie star stuff. I mean, like I said, I did think I said 3rd, 4th banana. It's like,
yeah, but he didn't influence you to go get a fur like himself.
Well, you know what, Dex? You got to be your own. You got you got to be your own. I mean, when you start copying people and try to do like they do. We had a guy on the team that did exactly that, and it was like, and everybody kind of, because he actually kind of looked like Namath, and he kind of had the hunched shoulders like
little
Namath.
mini-me?
Yes. There was another guy around here, and you probably saw him, Todd, if you went in there, but you're enough younger, maybe not. Did you ever go to Riddle's?
A little before my time. My older brother did.
All right, then he would know, because there was a guy that looked like, it's called mimicry, I think, in biology. It's where another, there's something called a viceroy and a monarch butterfly. Well, the monarch butterfly, has a bitter taste to it. So bugs it's one way or the other. So this other butterfly looks just like a monarch. So it goes around like, hey. But if you ate him, the birds would go, oh, I can't tell the difference. I'm not even going to mess with those butterflies. Those two, they look too much alike. But this guy would go around and he had Yankees. I mean, that's what tells you, right? Although thinking who I'm thinking probably ain't too far beyond the pale to consider he would do that. But he had the Yankee hat. He had the Yankee, warm-up jacket and all that stuff. And he looked just like Reggie Jackson. So obviously he'd show up and everybody go, "Hey, Reggie Jackson's in here."
And he was just, he's wearing his uniform.
Yeah, I mean, and then as I was saying, well, like you didn't work. I don't think you went out at night with number 72, your jersey on, did you?
No.
But see, I'm thinking Reggie Jackson probably actually did. So now more I'm thinking about it, now I'm thinking that could have been Reggie
He was
Jackson.
the straw that stirs the drink.
Yes. If you asked him, he would tell you the truth. That yes, that's true. It ain't Muhammad Ali. It's me.
I want to ask Dexter a question. You brought up something, John. Did anybody ever try to convert you or have you play linebacker standing up?
When I was at Oklahoma State, yes.
Given your size and your speed?
Yeah. Well, my first year at Oklahoma State, they put me at nose tackle.
Really?
Nose.
Well, that I can see where you could have been very effective as a nose tackle.
Let me tell you this story. You got some time? It's
Sure.
gonna be short. Okay. Jim Stanley was my coach, head coach, and we playing Florida State. And so I was a freshman. I was sitting on the bench. True story.
Now you're eligible your freshman year.
Yeah. Yes,
okay, they
yeah,
changed the
yeah,
rule
yeah,
because I couldn't play. But go ahead.
Jim Stanley came off the sideline. I was sitting on the bench. He grabbed me and threw me the game at nose tackle and told me to go get a couple sacks. I went there at nose tackle. For a while, that week they called me Richard Glover.
Yeah, from Nebraska, University of Nebraska.
You good, man. You good.
Hey,
So-
Big 8 guy too,
Yeah. So I threw a lot of moves. I got a few sacks, and I started at nose tackle. Now, for a while, I was 20 yards downfield because I get up, they drive me, they're running the ball.
Oh, knocking you 20 yards out.
I was in the end
They
zone.
said, we ain't going to let
True
him rush.
story.
We ain't going to let him rush.
So what do you mean you didn't dig in and
No. I was strictly paying the pass, all 4 plays.
That's kind of the story of your life, right? You're always playing the pass.
Listen at you. Yeah. So anyway, I played nose for about 2 or 3 games, but one play we was playing Colorado, running back named Berry, Blueberry something. I went and caught him. And
What, as he was getting the football?
No. As he was running downfield, I went and caught him. And this is Jim. That's what Jimmy Johnson was the head coach, and so they switched me. I mean, I was playing defensive end, but I still wouldn't. No, that was Jim Stanley. I had a few brains. So that was Jim Stanley. I was at the nose, and I went and caught Blueberry, and that was
the rest is
So in other words,
that was the end of nose tackle.
So it was your freshman year that you started off as a nose tackle, but before the year was out, they'd moved you out to end?
Out the end. Well, yeah, out the end. And then my sophomore year, they put me at linebacker a little bit. Yeah.
Want you to cover backs out of the backfield, that type of stuff.
Well, I had to tell you a story. My freshman year, we open up against Tulsa, and I was a defensive end. But I had problems. And so there was a tight end got over me.
This is your freshman year?
Freshman year.
You didn't do anything illegal to him, did you, Dex?
No. What I did was, I was
Luka.
supposed to go rush the quarterback. I went covering the tight end, like 20 yards downfield. And it was,
As a defensive end?
As a defensive end. And that's not what I was supposed to do.
You were freelancing.
But I didn't really know the plays. So they just
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
But I'm curious because as Todd brought this up, it's funny, once again, and literally I was telling this guy, they were doing some tree work over at my place this morning. There's a good old boy that grew up in the neighborhood. And, every once in a while you meet people that you really don't know, but you hit it off right away.
Right.
It's like you've known him your whole life. I mean, within 10 or 15 minutes, I'd met him about 3-4 weeks ago, and he seemed like my kind of guy. And so we get to talking, and we're talking football. He wanted to talk about football, and somehow we got talking about football. And I told him, I said, and I think I said this last week, I said it wasn't, the hard workers and the guys that really tried hard and they studied and, good community guys and all those guys. I told him, I said, those guys, he's trying real hard and he's doing his homework and he's probably going to be effective. I said, but he doesn't scare me. I said, the guys that make me nervous and keep me up at night are the guys with horsepower. Those are the guys that can hurt you. And of course, he got a big laugh. And I told him, I said, Dexter was one of those guys. I mean, and we got to talking about Lawrence Taylor. And I say this with all honesty. In my opinion, when it came down to pure horsepower, I think Dexter had a bigger engine than LT. I do. And I've always wondered, now you bring it up, and maybe I told him, I said, well, maybe Dexter couldn't backpedal as well and open his hips because, you know, he was in a 34. He had to play the pass occasionally and do that stuff. But, I mean, his real forte was rushing the passer. That's how he made his name. And that's how Dexter made his name. And I don't know, I'm out of my wheelhouse right now. You'd have to ask defensive ends and linebackers, and particularly a guy who's done both. A guy who had his hand in the dirt and a guy who actually played a 34 where he was out. From which position is there a position there which it's easier to rush? Or is it easier for a defensive end to rush the passer or an upright linebacker coming off the edge? I got no clue.
Well, I'll tell you, I think that I've seen only one guy stand up can get to the quarterback like that. Now if you're in the three-point stand, you got a lot more power.
Correct.
A lot more power. And so I would say I like putting my hand in the dirt because you got a lot of power. Now, LT, he can come off the edge, but he wasn't just blazing, but still, he come off and get to the quarterback. I think coming out of three-point stand is much more power.
Well, then let's explore this a little further. We have time, correct?
Good show, big guy.
Well, I can't remember because thank God I never had to block him, or you for that matter. I got to admit, though, I'd rather block LT. Both of them were going to get to the quarterback. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, thank you.
But I was going to have less damage done to me if I took LT on, because he might try to dance a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I just based on what Dexter said, he's going to be like a night train coming through. You know, in other words, you get in his way
between him, and he's not going to go around you.
You might as well be tied to the railroad tracks because the train.
You were probably 10, 20 pounds heavier than LT.
No, I was 257. He's about 250, 256.
So still.
Yeah, okay. Similar.
I don't know. My guess is that Dexter was a little bit bigger, but perhaps not. But actually, I would think if you lined him up in a 40-yard dash, I think Dexter would win that race.
That's no question there.
Yeah. So there's what I'm talking about, power.
Yeah.
And of course, him coming off the line. But you see, that's true. I'm guessing if you're standing up and you're rushing a passer from a standing position, I mean, at some point you're going to hit your stride, but you like the idea because of the leverage you had coming up and getting underneath the tackle and lifting him and then driving him back.
Yeah. Well, that's why I can get control of the tackle.
Exactly.
Yeah, once I get control of him, I can make him do what I want to do.
But see, would you consider yourself, I mean, in other words, it's like running backs. You know, you got some guys like me who strictly power, you know, a little wiggle, but early on in my career, and by the time I got later in the career, which actually my fame came from, I was too tired for the wiggle. It was just like, hey, the brakes were shot by then. I had no brakes.
The diesel was going in one direction.
Exactly. I was like a super tanker out on the ocean. You know, it takes them about 2 miles to stop.
You're
one of those
thank
things.
God they got a sound effect for this now.
Yeah. So what I was going to say, Dex, is that did you? I thought you had a little bit of a wiggle, but LT must have had like he was a scat back, if you will,
right?
And you were like a power runner type guy.
Well,
I'm comparing that to pass rushing.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you got to have the power and throw moves at the same time.
So you had a little wiggle to you as well.
Well,
plus,
I'm a good dancer.
Well, right. So in other words, you could drive a guy.
Yeah, right.
Did you ever spin off of him?
Yeah, absolutely.
You did spin.
Yeah, I have to spin.
And then there was a swim move, right? You tried to swim?
Yeah, well, not so much swim. I like to set him up. Run 3-4 yards.
What was the swim, though? Who did the swim the best? I mean, are we talking about a truce? Because I always heard him talking about, hey, you got to use the swim move.
Yeah.
Is that where you get on? Oh, that's over the top.
You get over.
Oh, okay.
Over the top.
Australian crawl.
How about the backstroke?
Got to do the swim.
Butterfly?
That one. That's what Dexter did when he was a nose tackle. He was doing the backstroke.
They're running the ball.
That's the commercial you were doing.
Yeah, exactly. Moonwalk, backstroke.
Yeah, I was moonwalk.
We'll have a commercial next week. That's an oldie but a goodie.
I got a question for John. John, last week we talked about the Dallas game. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not mistaken, was that when you were running down the sideline? You seemed like a deer then.
Yes, I was.
Yeah, for a touchdown. Was that 79 or?
Yeah, and you know what's weird is I always tell people that, as a running back, I'm not unlike I'll use the analogy. My dad used to have cattle, and we always had one, and we'd feed them grain or whatever, and they were all nice and friendly, but there'd always be one that was like don't trust these guys. And you know what? That was the smartest one in the bunch, because somehow
looking around,
intuitively that steer would know, hey, morons down there eating at that trough. I'm going to tell you, it ain't going to end well for you guys.
He's not your friend.
And of course, that truck would back up, and he was right. It wasn't going to end well for him.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he went along with him, but he'd always stand back there. But if you cornered that damn thing, that, you know, it wasn't going to go, it wouldn't charge you, rush you or anything, but if you put it in a corner, that was a different story. And that thing would never really, honestly, try to run over you necessarily. It was like, I tell you, wild animals will run to daylight better than any human beings, or I should say as well as, because it's fear that's motivating them. They don't want to really mess with you. Of course, unless, you know, they got a woman over here, and that would be a different story. Then they're going to try to take you out. But, you know, a steer, he ain't going to be able to help out a woman because he doesn't have his testicles. So, you know, it's like he's a done deal. So he's going to just try to get away so he doesn't end up in the back of that truck.
Yeah.
But so my point was, so you try to take and you try to, you know, basically get away the best that you can. And that's kind of the way I did. So I'm going down the sidelines against Dallas.
Right.
And the fear factor was
79?
gone at that point. Now it was just, you know, well, I was a runner. I could run.
Was that in 79?
That wasn't 79. Hell, I was already, 30 years old, 31 years old.
And you ran what, at 30?
Yeah. I had Tony Dorsett compliment me on that. Well, I'll tell you who it was. What was his name now? He used to coach. He coached with Rex Ryan's with the Jets. He was the cornerback chasing me, and it was like dead heat. He couldn't. I didn't pull away from him, but he didn't gain anything on me. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Everson Walls. What was Everson? It wasn't Everson Walls.
I don't think he went to Philly. Yeah.
It was somebody else. I can't think of his name. Oh, Dennis Thurman. It was Dennis Thurman.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had him. And don't you know, Dennis Thurman? He caught it in the locker room after the game. Said, "You let that fat old man outrun you down the sideline." Oh, that's pitiful, boy. That was a good thing. It was the last game of the season, so he didn't have to listen to it.
Well, this is a great segue. We'd be remiss if we did not talk about another incredible runner from Kansas, one Gayle Sayers, who passed away earlier this week, I believe at the age of 77, Riggo.
Yep, that's right.
And was at Kansas before you, and then why don't you?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I was growing. I would have been. He is 6 years older than me. I'm 71. He said, I don't know if his birthday, if he's going to be 78, but it's in the ballpark. My older brother, Frank, 2 years older than me, when he was a senior in college, which would have been, his graduating in 65, Sayers was drafted by the Bears in 65. So he was like 5 years older than my older brother, or 4 years older than my older brother. So he had been, like I said, 6 years older than me. And but as a kid growing up, and it's funny, I'm driving over today because I knew we were going to talk a little bit about Gale. I never saw him. You know, I went to the University of Kansas, same place he went, and I never got to see him play in person. You know, we'd listen to it on the radio occasionally, but you know, football in those days, my dad had us working on Saturdays and so it wasn't really something we really looked. You know, something we all sat around. The games you're never going to see one on TV, but you know, to listen to the broadcast. But I'd like to say several things I didn't know about Gayle Sayers, and I looked this up a couple years ago actually because I was curious. Turns out, because he actually grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, and one of my teammates with the Jets, Phil Wise, who was a strong safety for them, came in the same year I did, 71. He went to the University of Omaha, University of Nebraska at Omaha. You know, they went to the same high school in Omaha Central. And he told me a little about Sayers. Well, I got to looking and I found out, well, Sayers he's a true Jayhawker. That means that you're born in the state of Kansas. He was born in the state of Kansas. I always wondered why a guy from Omaha would go to, you know, to school at KU. Well, I guess it was in his blood. He was born in Wichita. And I don't know how long he lived there. But you talk about a guy and it's really, you got to talk about the Sayers. Because he had a younger brother and an older brother. Roger was his older brother, and his nickname, when he was called the Kansas Comet, Gayle Sayers was. His older brother was called Roger the Rocket. I mean, he could pick him up and lay him down on a track. On a track, yeah, he was faster than Gale. And I forget, Ron was something. Ron played a little bit of football as well in the NFL. Didn't make it, well, nothing like his brother. But do you realize Sayers? he broad jumped in high school almost 25 feet, 24 feet 11 inches.
Whoa.
I mean, my point is this guy was which I don't think people appreciate.
Horsepower.
He had tons of horsepower. He did. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, you look at a lot of guys, and because it's football, you don't really notice, but there's a lot of guys out there that are great athletes, and he was certainly a great athlete. And then, you look at all the runs that he made, and my senior year, he was number 48 at the University of Kansas. I was number 48.
Okay.
So, and I always tell people, I said, no, I didn't have anybody that was like my hero, and it turns out, well, maybe you did. And maybe his name was Gayle Sayers. So I got to be honest with you. Yeah, that was my number.
How many yards did Gayle Sayers get at Kansas? And did you?
I couldn't tell you. And you know what? Then they said, oh, and I see this, John Riggins broke Gayle Sayers' record. And
That's where I'm going.
and Dex, I go like this. Honestly, who cares? When I say who cares, it's going. That makes it sound like somehow we're in the same. No, two different guys here, folks. Just let's be straight about that.
Well, I just remember given my age and where he was with the Bears, and he to me was the first. He was Barry Sanders before Barry Sanders.
Yeah.
And
Who
was better?
That's a hard one. But let me say this, and I'll tell you why. My guess is this: if you would have given Sayers the kind of offenses that they have now. Yeah. Now, granted, and I will say this as time went on, the talent level changed, and more money got in the game. Better talent was on the field. So that's one argument, that Sayers didn't maybe run against the same kind of talent that Barry Sanders did. But another thing, there was no such thing as artificial turf. Artificial turf to a running back, particularly a scat back, huge advantage over anybody else because you can make your cuts stop.
Right.
You can guys literally leave their shoes when they try to keep up with you. But the one most of all, I would say, is the actual offenses that you see now as opposed to what they did back. Sayers, I do not believe, ever ran in a tailback position. I don't think he was ever more than 5 yards deep in the backfield. You put Sayers 8 yards deep in the backfield like they do nowadays, 7.5 yards, 7 yards. It would be pure scary what he would have done with a football. I honestly believe that, because he had great vision, and then as soon as he had something else that you don't see. That he would, and this is what sadly brought him to his end, in my opinion. And when I say his end, meaning that his career was cut way short, was because he was a risk taker. He'd be running down the field, and his instincts would either tell him, for whatever reason, to change direction without any pressure. And at the same time, it's almost like he must have had spidey senses, because there was some jagoff getting ready to tackle him, and this guy'd break his neck because all of a sudden, without you would go, how could he have known that guy was there? Well, sometimes when you do that, the next thing you know, you make that break, and actually where you're going, where the guy is waiting for you. In other words, you run into harm's way as opposed to away from it. And I don't know for sure because I've never seen the plays he was injured on, but I kind of think a guy that runs like that, who runs recklessly, with reckless abandon, as they say, I think that you subject yourself to more risk.
Would you say Bobby Mitchell was that kind of type of runner?
Bobby was somewhat like that too. Yeah. I never got to watch Bobby play that much, honestly. But Bobby was a track guy, and that was one of his things. He was a speed. I mean, he was speed, man. I mean,
and he could catch the football.
Yeah, and once he got it, no telling what was going to happen next, because he'd give you a little juke, and then all of a sudden,
that's a good analogy,
if he gets a step on you, he's gone.
Well, all you need to know is Gayle Sayers, he played only 7 seasons, 68 games.
Not really even truly 7 seasons, because he got hurt in 2 of them. So you get down to it, he played in 5 games. I think at age 34, elected into the Hall of Fame, youngest member of all time. And I don't think you'll see it again. But, you got to remember back in the 60s, 65, between 65 and 70, I mean, the guy completely electrified, the NFL. I mean, that one season, it was his rookie season of all things, he scored 22 touchdowns.
Well, that's what we wanted, and when the league was just becoming part of the TV generation and building, to see it in slow motion and see the cuts and the artistry of how he ran, and it wasn't, especially for Chicago, and how, specializing in defenses and not a lot of flash on offense, but here's this guy who was like I say, an artist, and it looked beautiful on TV.
Yeah, I thought Gayle Sayers ran better than Barry Sanders.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with it. I mean, when you get down to it, who's the best? But I mean, you kind of look at it's hard. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but let's just.
Who cares?
Huh?
Who cares you hurt their feelings?
I do. I don't like hurting people's feelings. It makes me think of a coach that passed away that I should have told him what I really thought. I never really got around to telling him. And it wasn't the guy I was talking about last week, just for the record. That ain't him.
Connect the dots
hey,
here.
Listen, we're going to be here all day if it's the coaches that I should have told off. We're just going to be here all day. That I never did because I didn't want to hurt their feelings.
But did you want to ever tell a bro off?
Huh?
Did you ever want to tell Bro off? Or did he could teach you how to run the football?
Donnie Bro?
No,
Don Bro?
His
My
coach.
coach?
Yeah,
No, Don would make you laugh. How could you ever be mad at Don Bro? It's like, Don was my kind of coach. It's like, hey, John, if you want to pay attention, you don't want to pay attention. Listen, by the time Don started coaching me, and Don was a quarterback, by the way, who played for the San Diego San Diego Chargers, and I think Houston as well a little bit in the old AFL.
Football?
Yeah, Don played for. He was a quarterback.
That.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
So, and this is the other part. When we get into the coach killing aspect of things, that it took me a while to figure this out. But in all honesty, it was like, you can't teach a guy how to run a football. I mean, let's just say this: if Sayers had told me something, I would have listened. I said, "Yeah, this guy's done it. I can." But if you're listening to some guy that's never done it, you're kind of like, eh.
I got a feeling Gale was in your corner going, I just see it and I make it up as I go.
I was talking same guy this morning. I'm saying, film. What good is film to a running back? I don't know. Maybe it helped. I would be curious to know if you polled all the, runners of over 10,000 yards, if they paid any attention to film. How many of them? What did you look for? I never knew. I mean, to me, I'm going. I had to go to sleep right away.
Good 20-minute nap.
Huh?
Good 20-minute nap.
That's the only thing I look forward to is to hear that projector rolling and the lights going out. And I went, okay, I'm good. I like it here.
At the meeting?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would.
You probably got a little sleep in your meetings too.
Yeah, you'd come in from hangover, and Torgy would throw the erase at me.
Try to keep you awake.
And Coy Bacon too.
What? Coy was awake?
No, he was sleeping.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say. I thought he was throwing erasers at you.
Mentors were Coy Bacon and you.
No, Coy Bacon was my mentor at all.
He was not.
He was not.
No, but then Coy introduced you to the league.
Coy was kind of my mentor.
And when you knew we're not in college anymore, you've told that story
about Coy.
Of Coy cussing out. Cussing out the coach and storming off.
Well, that was his last. Basically,
you remember that, John?
Yeah,
on
it was
the
like
field?
it was Coy's last stand.
Yeah, that's right.
Bacon's
it was like you
last
can't
stand.
come back from this. He was done. It's like it was like that ref used to do for a first down. He'd pat his hands together and he'd go first down. This was like Joe Gibbs going, Coy, you're out of here. Or like the refs do in baseball. Yeah, out of here.
Coy
when they
never
throw
to
somebody.
be seen again.
Yeah, that was
was
it.
telling me how shocked he
There was none but a vapor trail. Yeah, he was
a player cursing out a coach and talking back like he did.
I know it. Yeah, and Torgy told him to go in. He never came back.
Dexter's like, next man up.
That's what it was, exactly.
Next
That's a
man
good old
up.
days. But my point was I'd played for 9, 10 years or whatever, and I was like, by the time you get to that level, you're kind of like, I think I know what I'm doing here. And if you don't like it, then get next man up. That's the way it works.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's put a bow on this edition of TJRS. And I want to get Dex, you guys closing thoughts here on the B&G going against Cleveland. Your keys to the game, and who do you think's going to win, Dexter?
Before you answer that, Dex, I have some pineapple cream pie out here. I got to ask you, do you have a weak stomach? In other words, if I had a deer down out in the woods and I said, hey, Dex, I can't get over there right now. Would you mind gutting that deer out for me? Are you the guy?
I couldn't do it.
I'm with you, Dex.
I couldn't do it. I'm a city guy. I couldn't do it. Yeah.
Well, I grew up in town.
I hear you talk about all this centrails and hunting and fishing. I'm not that kind of guy.
Okay, Dex, I'm a little disappointed. I'll get over it.
I'm just running from the law.
That's why I was out in the woods.
Yeah.
Okay, back to business as usual.
I think this is going to be an even match in terms of the Redskins front seven got to get to the quarterback like they did the first game, and so I just think that Baker Mayfield under the gun, you don't know what you're going to get from him, and I think they have to harass this guy all day to win the football. And they have to harass this guy to win the football game and keep the pressure on this guy. Yeah.
So who do you like?
Who you got? I think he just said it.
I'm going to go ahead and go with
Cleveland?
the Washington football team.
Okay.
Who?
Washington football team.
By how
WTF?
many?
I don't know about that.
Close
Todd.
game?
Yeah.
We're running out of time, Dex.
Yeah. Yeah.
Time's up.
I'm just going to say the Washington going to win.
Okay.
I agree with Dexter. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game, to be honest with you. I mean, could change. And it could go – the fact that it's going to be a low-scoring game, Cleveland's playing at home. I'm going to go with Cleveland. I think that I think that both teams are going to score 20 points or 21 points or less. Could be wrong about that. I mean, I don't see Washington getting off the schneid offensively, but I do see their defense holding the Browns. I think either team will be able to win this at the end, but I think in the end they're playing at home. Well, once again, you know what? Got to quit thinking like that. There is no home game.
And I don't think Cleveland's allowing fans, and even if they do for any of these teams, you really can't tell.
Well, no, but go ahead, Dex.
Now, the league said they could only have 250 people in the stadiums. They just came out with that statement.
So any stadium can have 250 people.
Yeah.
But
In
Kansas
NFL
City had
game.
10,000.
That's not
Or
even.
15,000.
You usually have more on the sidelines
Yeah,
than you do, so
exactly.
that's negligible. So home field really isn't home field, other than you don't have to travel.
Well, what I'd like to see happen, just out of curiosity, is for TV to quit doing the crowd noise, the fake crowd noise. I'd like to just see what it's like, because I'm wondering if, as a viewer, because let's face it, they've got laugh tracks in every sitcom you ever watch. You got
Of course, you can't watch it without the laugh tracks.
You're so used to it.
You can't. It's not funny.
And my point is, without an audience there and without the fake crowd.
All right, we'll see what happens to the B&G. Check in with you on Tuesday next week. Thanks for watching, and thanks for listening.